Good day, St. Martin. Today is the closing of the parliamentary year, but it's also the day that I turned in the signed coalition agreement. And there's been some lessons learned. I hope I'm not the only one that learned those lessons. I hope that the MPs that are going out and those that are coming in also learned some lessons. We had the unfortunate scenario of having to go back to the polls 8 months later. And quite frankly, the only thing that we do when we call snap elections or early elections is upset the electorate. And this is one of the reasons that they lose trust in the system. And it is our responsibility as leaders, whether we are executive or legislative, to rebuild that trust with the electorate, to bring back hope, to let them know that we're going to do everything in our power to improve their lives. And to be honest, bring some dignity back to being a public servant. I am certain that the results of the election of August 2024 will forever remind the leaders of this country, outgoing and incoming, that the whole purpose of this job is to serve the people. If we continue to ignore that purpose, that objective, then we will have a worsening state of our island. And when you don't serve the masses, they will remind us that the power lies in the hands of the voters. Because what has happened for a long time is that leaders get caught up in power struggles instead of actually getting caught up in the people's struggles. I want to explain what the last 3 weeks have been like, or almost 3 weeks have been like for me since Election Day. After coalition talks began, I was asked if I would enter into executive, given the two options that was negotiated by the Party for Progress. And I clearly stated where my strengths could be better applied. That was a discussion that I had with the leader, and that request was taken back to the team and the big donors and supporters. And the response received was that continuity was preferred. Now, was I disappointed in that? Absolutely. I'm human. I was disappointed in that. And at a certain point, I even said that I felt like the party was holding me back. And, you're probably wondering, why am I telling you this? But what I'm saying here right now is also what I said to the party leader, to her face, and in writing. And that's the political maturity that we're always talking about. And, I said to you, that yes, I was indeed disappointed. And one of the reasons that I felt that is because there also was a candidate meeting that I wasn't invited to. And when I asked the leader about it, it was initially denied. And then when I was very specific in my persistence, and I said, well, wasn't there a meeting in a specific place on a specific day? And then I was told that, oh, well, I left the candidate group chat, so basically I wasn't invited. But we're the tech savvy party, so normally our requests come via email, and I didn't receive an email after verifying that. That's pretty much, like what I wanted to get out to the public. And again, you're probably wondering, why am I telling you this? But I've read that the hardest thing in leadership is compromise. And political compromise is deferring one's ideas for the majority. And that's where I find myself. 689 of you voted for me. Some of you are upset that I'm not an executive. Some of you are supporting me regardless of what my decision would be. And some of you are telling me to stay in Parliament. But I've had so many calls of people in those three categories that I felt the need to control the narrative, which I very, very rarely do in ever since being in office. But this is one of those opportunities to control the narrative. What I want to say to the 689 voters, because it's 690, but I voted for myself. What I want to say to you is, this is an election for Parliament. And while some of you may be disappointed that I'm not in executive, 689 of you voted for me and gave me a seat at the table. And you should be proud of that, because I definitely am proud of that. And having a seat at that table, which is in the House of Parliament, not only gives me the opportunity to look over one ministry, it gives me the opportunity to look over all of the ministries. And sometimes we tend to forget what comes with the job, the task of being a member of Parliament. And don't for 1 minute think that I'm going to take anything lightly, or that everything that has happened in these 3 weeks has been easy, because it has not been easy. What our country deserves right now is maturity, and the hardest thing of leadership, which is compromise. So my message to you today is to encourage that from all your members of Parliament, because it's not just me that has been given that task. There's 14 other MPs that have been given that task of actually having responsibility of 7 different ministries. And I want to leave a message here as a preview for what is to come. To the Prime Minister, the VKS officers have been waiting for a while to get the same benefits as a full-time worker within the justice system. And when we hear the word vrijwilliger, we think that it's voluntary. But those people are working full-time all the time, and I know you'll do everything in your power to actually make that a reality. To the Minister of VSA, we have a struggle in SZV, and one of those reasons for that struggle is the fact that our policyholders, the base of that, is very limited. Perhaps you should consider expanding the policyholders to sole proprietorship, like taxi drivers, bus drivers, so that they don't have to pay private insurance all the time. And to the Minister of Finance, our tax environment is absurd. And we rely so much on private sector to fix a lot of the things that technically government should be doing. And I think it'll go a long way that tax reform is actually done. Start by decreasing profit tax to 15%. And see whether or not it's actually possible for sole proprietorships to be held by persons born outside of the Netherlands Antilles who are permanent residents and actually naturalized citizens. That'll go a long way in expanding the revenue that comes into the Ministry of Finance. To the Minister of Rami, don't forget that there's a big responsibility that comes on your plate as well, because we are a tourist destination. And sometimes that gets a little bit confused with the Ministry of Tayat. So these are all things that we can do across ministries. You have a big responsibility of ensuring that we don't really have sewage running in our roads anymore, that we have proper road markings, that with the help of the Minister of Tayat, we can actually get those proper road markings to the people that need it, because they're always pooling their money together, which is the taxi drivers. And a perfect example is what they do every couple of years at the head of town, because the lines aren't drawn and they pool money together and do it themselves. To the Minister of Education, we have a big problem here where students are left behind or left in a corner when they're not keeping up to speed like the rest of the students. Now, that may not be the fault of a teacher, but what it means is that we lack the extra assistance we need to make sure that kids get the best education ever. And one of those things that will go a long way is for parents and families that have kids that are on the spectrum, that kids that are autistic, that we actually have services and teachers that know how to deal with those special needs. To the Minister of Justice, continue doing the work started by previous ministers, and I say previous ministers plural, to bring the LBAs up to date. But what I will ask you, Minister of Justice, is also to consider something I said publicly, where in the absence of having an abundance of cash to increase salaries that are very much needed across the board of essential workers, work closely with the Minister of Finance to give incentives to property owners to actually provide lower priced housing or rent, in the absence of us being able, or the Ministry of Rami being able to give affordable housing right now. Work closely because essential workers that actually need a chance to thrive would include nurses, firemen, police officers, school teachers, and as one NGO worker reminded me, NGO workers. It's not limited, but it gives those essential workers within our community a fighting chance to actually, with the limited sort of salary or the salary that hasn't been updated in a long time, to afford housing in neighborhoods of their preference, and do that in conjunction, in partnership with private sector. Allow tax relief to come in. And that is pretty much my message for today, and what the public will have to look forward to as for me being their representative, as the second biggest vote getter, as a member of parliament. There is strength in that position, and we all have a duty to support our government, to give St. Martin a chance to actually thrive, to get back on track, and give us the best country that we could possibly provide for our citizens. Thank you very much.